The foreman put a mop in her hands and pointed at the puddle under the memorial stand. She wiped it. Stitched across her vest was the name of a cleaning contractor. Her borrowed boots were 3 sizes too big, rags stuffed in the toes. On the plaque above her, someone had engraved her own name. In September, she would come back and set 3 things down on the table where they were selling her company. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe so these stories keep finding you. And tell us in the comments what town you are watching from tonight. The floor cleaner smelled like lemons poured over something colder. Every floor in that building smelled like it. She had signed the purchase order for the stuff 4 years ago, and now she was pushing it across the concrete in a gray vest that belonged to somebody else. 60 folding chairs. She had counted them while the caterer set out the water urns, because counting was what her hands did when the rest of her wanted to run.
The other woman on the lakeside crew that day was named Deb, and Deb had been doing event turnarounds for 6 years and knew where every mop sink in the city was. "You want the sink by the freight door, not the one in the restroom," Deb said, ringing out over the bucket. "Restroom tap runs cold all summer. Ask me how I know." "How do you know?" "6 years," Deb laughed. "You're new. What'd you do before?" "Logistics." "Ah." Deb was already moving. "That's why you're walking around counting the chairs. Doesn't help, honey."
There's always one more than they told you. The drivers came in first and stood at the back in their work boots. The office people came later and took the front rows. Nobody sat in the second row, and she did not understand why until she got close enough to read the little white card taped to the chair. Reserved for family. The chair stayed empty the whole afternoon because there was no family left to sit in it. Hollis Trask found her by the water table. He was a big man who talked in short pieces, and he never used a name if a job title would do. "Lakeside," he said. "There's melt under the stand, before the speaking starts." "Yes, sir." "Shift 12, right?" "Shift 12. He walked off. It was a fair instruction. That was the part she kept turning over. Nothing he said to her that day was unfair. He needed a floor dry before a room full of people walked on it, and she was the person holding the mop.
She worked the puddle in slow half circles so the wheels of her bucket would not squeak. Above her head, on a wooden easel draped in navy cloth, sat a bronze plaque the size of a cutting board. It had been cast in a shop in Superior for $1,100. She knew that because the invoice had crossed her desk in February when the building it was made for was still a hole in the ground. The plaque had her name on it.
In her coat pocket, wadded in the lining, there was a gray plastic thing, about the size of a matchbox. It had a hole in one end for a lanyard, and a serial number pressed into the back. It dug into her hip when she bent. 3 times that month, she had almost dropped it in a trash barrel. 3 times she had put it back, for no reason she could have explained to anybody. And she had stopped trying to explain things to anybody in April. Roland Keefe stepped up to the microphone at 4 o'clock. He was good at this. She had watched him do it at retirement parties and at the funeral of a dock supervisor in the winter. And he was better today than she had ever seen him. He did not perform grief. He let his voice go a half step quieter than the room needed, so that people leaned in. "Most of you never met her," he said. Heads nodded across the whole room. Drivers at the back. Schedulers in the 3rd row. A woman from accounts payable who had emailed her twice a week for 6 years and had never once seen her face. That was her choice, and she was stubborn about it. No interviews, no ribbon cuttings. She used to say, "The freezer does not care who owns it." A little laughter, the sad kind. She had said that. She had said it in a hallway on the 4th floor with a cup of coffee in her hand, and he had been standing right there. And here it was, coming back at her out of a speaker. Her hand went into her coat pocket and closed around the gray plastic. She did not know she was doing it. "On September 12th, Keefe said, we open the new distribution center on the North Shore Road, and this plaque goes on the wall by the front doors, and her name goes on the building.
It is the last thing I can do for her. It is not enough. Nothing would be. He stepped back. Somebody started clapping, and then thought better of it.
Afterward, the room broke into small groups, the way rooms do, and the caterer started stacking cups, and nobody looked at the woman with the mop. And that was the first time all day the situation worked in her favor. There was a table by the door with a guest book on it, cream paper, a pen on a little chain, the kind banks use. She had not planned it. She would say that later to Iva, and it would be true. She just found herself standing there with the pen in her hand, looking at 3 pages of signatures from people who had worked for her. She wrote her own name. She wrote it the way she had always written it, the C too large, and the tail of the last letter running off, because a person's hand does not forget how to say who it belongs to. Then she stood there and looked at it. Ink on paper. 6 letters, and 7 letters, and a space in the middle. In 4 weeks, it was the only place in the world where those letters existed in the present tense. Ma'am? A young man from Human Resources, holding a stack of programs. He looked at the book. He looked at her vest. He looked at the book again, and his face did a thing she would remember for a long time, a kind of embarrassed flinch, as though she had done something obscene at a funeral. He went and got Trask. Deb, stacking chairs 8 feet away, went very still and very busy at the same time, which is a thing people on a day rate learn to do. Trask came over, read the page, and did not raise his voice. He never did. He put one hand flat on the book, tore the page out along the binding, folded it in half, and then in half again, and pushed it into the breast pocket of his shirt. "You don't put jokes in a guest book," he said. "It isn't a joke. Then it's worse." He picked up her bucket by the handle and set it outside the door, which was how he ended conversations. "Don't come back tomorrow. I'll call Lakeside myself." Deb caught up with her in the parking lot with both buckets, because Deb had carried both buckets out rather than leave one behind. "What did you write in there?" "My name." Deb looked at her for a second, then decided, the way people decide about strangers on a day rate, which is quickly and without much evidence. "Well," she said, "it's your name." She set the second bucket down and went to catch her ride. The wind off the lake in late April still had teeth in it. She watched Trask's truck go, and the folded page in his breast pocket going with it, and she felt the plastic thing in her coat digging into her hip. The head office was 2.5 miles up Garfield Avenue. She started walking. The lobby of the head office smelled like burnt coffee and wet carpet, and it had smelled like that since the machine on the mezzanine started scorching the pot in 2019. She had approved a new machine. Purchasing had never ordered it. She walked up to the front desk at 9 a.m. and said her own name out loud for the first time in 4 weeks. The woman behind the glass typed it. Then she stopped typing. Then she picked up the phone and turned her chair away, which is what people do when they are told not to alarm anybody. 2 security officers came out of the elevator bank, and behind them, in no hurry at all, came Roland Keefe. She had expected shouting. She had expected to be walked out by the elbow. Instead, he stopped 6 feet away, looked at her for a long moment, and told the officers to wait in the hall. "Come with me," he said. The small conference room on the ground floor had a table for 6 and a window facing the loading apron. He shut the door. He took a paper cup from the stack by the water cooler and filled it and set it down in front of her. And she watched him do it, because a man who thinks he is talking to a lunatic does not pour her a drink. "Sit," he said. She sat. "You told the desk you're Corrine Barlow." "I am." "All right." He folded his hands. "The safe on 4. The one behind the print of the harbor."
4 turns right to 31. Back to 72. Right again to 19. It sticks at the last number. You have to lift the handle while you turn it. He did not react. Your father's dog. Pilot. He was a bad dog, and my father lied about it for 11 years. The lot number on the first load this company ever ran. There wasn't one.
My grandfather ran it in 1958 under a hand receipt because the packing house had no numbering system yet. The receipt is in the case in the lobby you just walked past, and there is a coffee ring on it, and my father is the one who put it there. The radiator ticked under the window. Out on the apron, a yard tractor backed a trailer into a dock with that long, slow beeping. Keith looked at her for a while. Then his eyes went down, and he took in the vest, and the pants that were not hers, and last of all, the boots, the borrowed ones, the ones with the rag packed into the toes so her heel would not slide. He looked at those boots for 2 full seconds. Corinne Barlow died on the 28th of March, he said. I stood at the service. I carried a corner of the casket. And you don't have a single piece of paper in the world. That was when she understood. He had not asked those 3 questions to find out who she was. He had known who she was from the moment the elevator doors opened. He had asked them to find out how much she remembered. Roland. Don't. The loadout of Pier 9 that night. What was the reefer set at when it left the yard? His hands came apart on the table. Just that. Nothing else in his face moved. I'm going to give you some advice, he said, because I worked for your father, and because I do not enjoy this. Go somewhere else. Pick another name. Nobody is looking for you, and nobody will come after you if you go. That is a better offer than you understand. She did not touch the water. When she stood up, the surface of it had not moved once. She went to 3 places that day. The bank on Superior Street told her the account was closed on the 8th of April at the instruction of the estate. The clerk was young and kind, and turned the monitor a little so she could see it herself. Which was the worst part. The Social Security office gave her a number, and she waited 2 hours and 40 minutes on a molded plastic chair, and the man at window 4 typed and then leaned back from his screen the way people lean back from a smell. Ma'am, our records have you deceased. Date of death, March 28. That's wrong. It happens more than you'd think, he said. And he meant it kindly. And he even wrote down a phone number on a sticky note. You'll want to start with the county. The death record is the root of it. Everything else just copies from that. And how do I fix the county record? You bring proof. What kind of proof? He thought about it honestly. She watched him think, and she watched him arrive at the place she had already arrived at 3 weeks ago. Something official, he said. The Department of Motor Vehicles took 20 minutes and 1 sentence. By 4 in the afternoon, the same 3 words had come at her off 3 different screens in 3 different buildings. And not one human being in any of those buildings had told her no. That was the thing nobody warned you about. There was no villain behind any of those counters. There was a field in a database, and the field said what it said. And every person she met that day was decent and helpful, and completely unable to do anything about it. The complaint was filed at 4:40 that afternoon. She would not learn the exact time until August. Criminal impersonation of a deceased person, sworn out by an officer of Barlow Cold Chain, with an attached statement noting that the subject had disrupted a memorial service the previous day
and had written the decedent's name in a guest book in the presence of witnesses.
Lakeside called her off the list that evening. The dispatcher was apologetic and vague and used the word liability twice. The shelter on 1st Street took her name at 8 and gave it back to her at 8:15 because a flag had come up on her file, and the woman at the desk was not allowed to explain what it was and did not know herself. It rained after 10, and the temperature dropped, and the rain turned into that half-sleet the lake throws up in the spring.
At 11 at night, she walked the fence line of a truck yard on the east edge of town, past 7 cabs and 2 dead trailers, trying every door handle she could reach. The 8th one opened. A reefer unit that is running right makes 1 sound. The one on the trailer across the yard was making 2. A hum with a click under it every 9 or 10 seconds. And the click was what woke her, a little after 5.
She lay in the sleeper of a truck that was not hers and listened to it and knew exactly what it was. And there was nothing she could do about it. And that combination was the whole shape of her life now. At 6, the door opened. The man standing on the step had a thermos under one arm and a clipboard under the other, and a face that had not slept much either. He looked at her. He looked at the sleeper curtain she had pulled shut, and at her boots lined up on the floor mat, toes pointing out, the way you leave boots when you plan to be gone before anyone comes.
She waited for him to reach for a phone. "That clicking," he said. "You hear it? Since 5. You know what it is? Your condenser fan clutch is going. It'll run another 2 weeks, and then it'll go on a Sunday, because they always go on a Sunday." He stood there in the cold with his thermos. "Can you read a temperature chart?" "Yes." "You want to work today?" "Yes." He put down the clipboard, took a bank envelope out of his coat, counted out 6 $20 bills, and handed them to her through the door. "That's the shift," he said. "Up front, because I hate arguing about it at the end. Noah Teague. It's my yard." She folded the money in half and then in quarters and pushed it down into her boot before she took his hand. And she saw him notice that too. He did not ask her name. Not then. That was the part she thought about later, lying awake in a room with a door that locked. He paid her before he asked her anything at all. The load was cheese and butter out of a plant in Wisconsin going to a grocery warehouse in Hermantown, and it had to ride between 34 and 38 degrees the whole way. Teague Cold Freight had 2 tractors and 3 trailers and 1 customer left, and she worked that out from the whiteboard in his office in under a minute without meaning to. She walked the trailer while he did his paperwork. Then she came and stood in his office door. "Your set point's fine," she said. "Your load isn't. Whoever stacked it put the last 2 pallets flat against the back wall and killed your return air path. Your sensor sits in the return. It's reading 35 degrees because 35 degrees is what's going past the sensor. The middle of that trailer is warmer, and you have no way of knowing how much warmer." Noah put down his pen. "The grocery chain pulls a pulp temp on 3 cases at the dock," she said. "They'll pull the ones by the doors, because that's what everybody does. And those will pass. Sooner or later, somebody pulls from the middle. Then it's a rejected load and a claim, and you don't have a second customer." He looked at her for a while. Then he got up, and the 2 of them restacked the back of that trailer in the cold, with the doors open. And it took 40 minutes, and he broke a pallet strap and swore at it. And she handed him a new one without being asked, the way you hand a thing to someone when you have done the job before. When they were done, he went into the office and came back with a small gray plastic box the size of a matchbox with a hole in one end for a lanyard. "Put one of these in the middle," he said. "Then it isn't my word against theirs." She took it from him. She stood in the open doorway of that trailer with it in her palm, and the cold rolled out around her ankles. And she looked at it and thought nothing at all. She hooked it to a strap between 2 pallets and closed the doors and pulled the seal, and did not once in that entire moment think about her coat, which was hanging on a nail in the office, 11 feet away, with the same object, dead in the lining. That is not a thing she has ever been able to explain to anybody.
She had held one in her hand and not seen it. They ran the load together. He drove. She rode. Coming back, they swung by Pier 9 to drop 2 empty pallets. And that was the first time she had been inside that fence since April, and she pulled the collar of her coat up without deciding to. The gate shack had a window at truck height, and a woman in it with reading glasses on a beaded chain. Odalis Reyes had worked that gate for 19 years. She had a clipboard, a paper log, and a card reader with a piece of duct tape across it. Teague, 2 pallets, empty, Noah said. Bay 6. Oda leaned to write the time and glanced past him and stopped. She looked at the woman in the passenger seat for perhaps a second and a half. "Afternoon, ma'am," she said. Then something went across her face. A small correction, the way you catch yourself calling a teacher mom. "Afternoon," she said again, differently, and looked down at her log and wrote the time twice, because the first one came out wrong. Noah pulled through the gate. "You know her?" "No." "Card reader still taped," he said, half to himself. "That thing's been out since March. Whole yard writes by hand, and nobody's fixed it. That's Barlow for you now." She did not answer. She was looking in the mirror at the little lit window and the woman inside it, bent over a paper log. They got back to the yard at 7 at night, and he unlocked a door at the end of the shop, a room with a cot and a sink and a space heater with a frayed cord. "Drivers use it when the weather's bad," he said. "There's a lock on the inside. Use it."
He was halfway out when he stopped in the doorway with one hand on the frame. "I paid you already," he said, "so you don't owe me this. But it makes tomorrow easier if I've got a name to write on a line." The rest of her life turned on the 2 seconds after that, and she knew it at the time, which is rare. "Wren," she said. The bus shelter on Garfield had a plexiglass wall with 4 months of paper on it, layer over layer, and the whole thing smelled like wet pulp and old glue in the sun. She was reading a card about a lost cat when she saw the corner of the sheet underneath. She peeled the cat back. Missing. A photograph run off a home printer, the ink going pink the way home printer ink does. A woman about 40, with her hair pulled back and a lanyard around her neck, squinting into the camera in somebody's kitchen. Rosalind Pike. Last seen. March 28. And a phone number written in by hand across the bottom, over and over on all the copies, because whoever made them had run out of ink before they got to that line. She stood in front of it for a long time. She counted the days. It came to 112, and she counted them again to be sure, because that was what her hands did. Then she went to the payphone outside the laundromat, which was one of 11 payphones left in that county, and she took the money out of her boot and got quarters at the change machine and stood there with them in her palm. She counted them twice before she put them in. Iva Pike came in 19 minutes. She came fast, half running from the parking lot, and she was already talking before she was close enough to be heard, and her face had a thing on it that was almost unbearable to look at. Hope, running at full speed. "You've seen her? Where? When did you see her?" "I need you to sit down. Just tell me where." "Miss Pike, your sister died on the 28th of March, on the North Shore Road, about 4 miles past the water plant." Iva stopped. Her mouth was still shaped for the next question. "Who are you?" "I was in the truck." "No." Iva stepped back. "No, because the police would have... because somebody would have called me. 4 months I have been calling them. I go in every Thursday, every single Thursday, and they tell me a grown woman is allowed to leave. They wrote that down. There's a form, and it has a box on it, and the box says voluntary. Nobody called you because the truck was not on any Barlow manifest, and your sister was not on anybody's payroll. Northline hired her by the run. If a load like that goes off the road,
The people who have to make phone calls are the people who signed something. Nobody signed anything for her. You're lying. Iva's voice went up and cracked in the middle. Why would you come here and say this to me? She asked me if I wanted the radio on, she said. Iva stopped. About 20 minutes out of the yard. She said, do you want the radio? And I said, whatever you like. And she said, that's not an answer. And then she turned it off.
She kept both hands on the wheel the entire time. She had a thermos with a dent in the side that she wedged between the seat and the doghouse so it wouldn't roll. Iva sat down on the curb. She sat down the way people do when their legs simply stop being part of the plan. And she put both hands flat on the concrete beside her. And she did not cry for almost a minute. That thermos was our mother's, she said. The traffic went by on Garfield. A city bus pulled in and opened its doors, and nobody got on, and it pulled out again. You said you were in the truck, Iva said at last. So who are you? That's the second thing I have to tell you, and it's worse. Can you drive? Forest Hill Cemetery is up the hill behind the college, and the new sections are out at the back, where the trees have not grown in yet, and everything is very flat and very green, and looks like a golf course somebody has been sat on. They parked on the service road.
Eva followed her across the grass, past the rows, out to a granite marker set flush with the ground, the way that section requires. It was clean. Somebody had been out with a trimmer that week. There were flowers in the metal cone, and they had been changed recently. And the company still had a standing order with the florist on 3rd Street, because that had been going since her father died, and nobody had thought to cancel it. The stone said, Corinne Elise Barlow. And under that, 2 years. And under that, a line from something her grandfather used to say about the lake. That's the woman from the news, Iva said. That's the one that died in March, the cold storage one. They named a building. They're naming it in September. What's she got to do with my sister? And she found she could not simply say it. She had walked all the way out there rehearsing a sentence, and the sentence would not come. So she crouched down and put 2 fingers on the top edge of the stone, on the warm granite. And she said the only true thing available. Your sister is under here. Iva looked at the stone.
She looked at the trimmed grass and the fresh flowers and the standing order that had gone on paying itself all summer. Under my sister's name, under mine. The wind came up off the lake through the young trees at the back of the section. They pulled a woman out of that cab, and they had a purse and a driver's license, and a company that wanted an answer by Monday, she said. So they had their answer by Monday.
She has been lying under my name for 4 months, and every week somebody comes out here and cuts this grass for her, and nobody has ever once said her name out loud in this cemetery. Iva turned to face her. Her eyes were red and dry and absolutely steady. Then who are you? She stood up and pointed down at the stone. Her. The ceiling fan in the county waiting room turned slowly and out of true, and every 4th revolution, the chain on the pull switch tapped the glass globe, and the 2 of them sat under it for 50 minutes, listening to that tap.
The woman who came out to talk to them was named Denise, and she was not the problem. That has to be said, because it would be easier if she had been. She read the form Iva had filled out. She read it twice, and she did not smirk once. And when she looked up, her face was the face of somebody doing arithmetic she already knows the answer to. So you believe the decedent, buried under the Barlow marker, is your sister, Rosalind Pike? Yes. Do you have a dental record for her, or a physician who treated her, or a genetic sample from a relative on your mother's side? Our mother's gone. I've got a hairbrush. A hairbrush is not nothing, Denise said. It's not enough to open a case on its own. What I need to reopen an identification is a reason on paper. Do you have any document that puts your sister in that truck that night? She worked for Northline. By the run. By the run. Denise nodded slowly, and that nod was worse than an argument.
Then she turned to the other one. And you're stating that you are Corinne Barlow?
Yes.
Ma'am, I want to be straight with you, because I think you'd rather have it straight. Our office issued a death certificate on the 2nd of April on an identification that had a purse, a license, a company officer's confirmation, and a vehicle registration behind it. To undo that, I need to be told to undo it, either by a court or by a next of kin with new evidence, or by our own review if somebody hands me something I can put in a file.
I'm standing in front of you. Yes, Denise said, and I believe you believe it. But you understand I cannot take a statement from a person who our records say is deceased. The statement has no signatory. Do you follow? There's nobody to sign it. Then I go to court. You'd file a petition to establish that you're alive. It's rare, but it exists. You'd want a lawyer. To hire a lawyer, I need an account. Yes. To open an account, I need identification. Yes. Which I get by fixing the record.
Denise put both hands flat on the folder and did not say anything at all. And the chain tapped the globe, and the fan went around. There is one more thing you should know, she said finally, because you'll find out anyway, and I'd rather you heard it sitting down. There's an active complaint against a person matching your description for criminal impersonation of a deceased individual. If you file at the courthouse, that complaint is in the same building. Iva put her name on the request anyway. The line under it said other party of interest, and the pen hovered a while, and then the other name went on it too, in that handwriting with the oversized letter and the tail that ran off the edge. That signature was worth nothing for 6 weeks. It cost them everything they had in 3 days. The letter to Iva came Tuesday. Northline Driver Solutions thanked her for her service and cited paragraph 11, section C, which allows either party to conclude a placement without cause on 7 days' notice. It was true.
It was in the contract she had signed, and it was signed by her, and there was nothing in it about a form filed at a county office. The letter to Teague Cold Freight came Wednesday. Barlow Cold Chain would not be renewing the seasonal haul agreement for the coming term, citing consolidation of regional carriers ahead of the ownership transition. That was also true. It was in the agreement. Nobody called anybody. No threat was made in any direction. And that was the part that took the air out of the room. Because there was nothing to point at and say, there. That is the thing they did to us.
Noah sat at the desk in his office that night, with the whiteboard behind him and a legal pad in front of him, and ran the numbers 3 times. 9 weeks, he said. I can hold both trucks 9 weeks. Then I sell the second one, and I drive the first one myself. And I'm a guy with a truck again. I'll go tonight. He looked up. If I'm not here, they've got no reason to come at you. I'll be out of the county by morning. I'm good at it now. Sit down, Noah said. Noah, you sit down. He capped the pen. My father drove for an outfit out of Cloquet. 16 hours. Then they put him back out at 4 in the morning. He went off County 6 into the trees, and there was nobody else on that road, so there was nothing to investigate. He looked at the whiteboard for a second. You know what's in his file? 3 words. Driver error. That's the whole file. 2 lines of type and a date. He turned the legal pad face down. 9 weeks is 9 weeks, whether you're here or not. I'd just rather spend it doing something. Roland Keefe came out to the yard on Wednesday night. He did not come through the gate. He parked on the gravel shoulder outside the fence, with his headlights off, and stood on the other side of the chain link, with his hands in his coat pockets. And when she came out of the shop, he did not move toward the gate at all, which she understood. A fence is a useful thing to have between you and a conversation. You filed at the county, he said. Yes. That was Monday. 2 letters went out Tuesday and Wednesday. I want you to notice that I am not pretending those are unrelated. I noticed. He took an envelope out of his coat and held it up against the wire so she could see it, and did not try to push it through. There's a lawyer in Boise, he said. He does this. It is not forgery, and it is not a crime, and I have had it looked at. A person who has been declared dead in error can be issued documents under a different name through a probate exception.
It takes about 5 months. There's enough in here to live on for those 5 months, and a good deal more. You want me out of the state. I want you alive, somewhere that is not this county, Keefe said. I have never once wanted anything else. I want you to understand that, because in about a month, you are going to be telling people what kind of man I am, and I would like the record to be accurate on that one point. The lake wind came across the gravel and moved the chain link a little.
Say her name, Corinne said. He looked at her. The woman in the truck, she said. Say her name. She watched him go through it. It was not fast, and it was not cruel, and that was somehow the worst version of it. He genuinely tried. He went back through 4 months of legal calls and board memos and site plans and press statements, looking for a name. In the way you check a coat pocket you already know is empty. I don't have it in front of me, he said. Rosalind Pike. Rosalind Pike, he repeated, and he even said it carefully, the way a decent man repeats something he intends to remember. That's the whole thing, Roland. You're not going to jail for hating anybody. You never hated anybody. You just never once had to write her down. He put the envelope back in his coat. The offer is open until the 12th, he said. After that, there's nothing I can do for you. And I would like it on the record that I tried. He got in his car and backed out onto the road, and she stood at the fence in the dark until she could not hear it anymore. Iva came by on Thursday with 2 grocery bags because she had cleaned out her own refrigerator, having no further use for a refrigerator with a full week of food in it and no paycheck coming. The 3 of them ate at the desk. Nobody said much. Then Iva put her fork down and asked the question. Say it works. Say somebody signs a paper tomorrow, and you get your name back, and you get all of it back. All of it. The buildings and the trucks and the whole thing. She was not angry. That was what made it land. What does my sister get? Iva. No. I want the actual answer. Because when you get your name back, that stone still says Barlow, and she's still under it. And there is still a form in a drawer downtown with a box ticked that says she left on purpose. She picked her fork back up. So what does she get? There was no answer to that, and the 2 women sat there in the truck yard office and did not pretend there was. That night, she went back to the room at the end of the shop, and she took off the coat she had been wearing since March, and she turned out both pockets onto the table under the lamp. 2 quarters. A key to a door in a building she no longer had the right to enter. Final verdict. 1 week. And a gray plastic box the size of a matchbox, scuffed at the corners, with a serial number pressed into the back. She left all 3 on the table and lay down. On the front face of the gray box, in the dark, a small green dot came on, and went off, and came on again, at intervals of exactly 5 minutes, the way it had been doing all summer while nobody watched it. The office at the yard smelled like diesel and warm thermal paper, because the little printer under the desk ran all day, and the roll never got changed until it was down to the pink stripe. The call came in at 9:10 on a Monday. She could hear the whole thing from the other side of the desk, because Noah held the phone away from his ear, the way men do when they have decided not to argue. The load had gone to a distributor in Rice Lake. The distributor had pulled a pulp temp at the dock and gotten a number they did not love. And Noah's trailer sensor said one thing, and the receiving clerk's handheld said another. And the whole conversation came down to one sentence. Where's your logger? There had not been one in that load.
He had used his last 2 on the grocery run and had not reordered because the box of 10 cost $41, and $41 was a real number in that office now. He hung up and sat there. $1,400, he said. Gone. Not because the load was warm, because I can't prove it wasn't. They wouldn't take your reefer download? My reefer belongs to me. He rubbed his face with both hands. That's the whole thing.
A customer doesn't want my word, and doesn't want my machine's word either, because my machine works for me. They want a sealed box that went in cold and came out cold, and doesn't care who owns it. Nobody trusts a person. Everybody trusts the little gray box. She was standing by the file cabinet with a cup of coffee in her hand. She put the cup down. She did not put it down hard. She put it down the way you set something on a table when your hands have gone strange. And then her right hand went into her coat pocket, and the pocket was empty. And for a second and a half, she could not breathe.
It was on the table in the back room, where she had left it Thursday night. It had been in that coat since the 28th of March. She had pulled it out of a case of insulin on the dock at Pier 9 at 10:40 at night, because she wanted to read it herself instead of being handed a summary in the morning. And there had been no reader in the shack, so she had put it in her pocket and gotten into the truck. Noah? Yeah. Do you have a reader? He looked up. For loggers? Yeah. In the drawer. Why? Here is what she had told herself on the 4 separate occasions when her hand had found that thing in the lining and she had considered it and put it back. She had told herself the cab burned. She had told herself a device that small, dropped down a bank in a fire with a person landing on it, was scrap. She had told herself that the readers were all inside the fence at Pier 9 and she was never getting inside that fence again. And underneath all 3 of those, which were reasonable, sat the 4th one, which was not. She had spent 4 months trying to prove she was a person. It had not occurred to her that the thing in her pocket had spent those same 4 months proving it for her, 5 minutes at a time, without being asked. She went and got the coat. The reader was an old one, a cradle with a cord, and the software on the shop laptop was 3 versions behind and took 2 minutes to open. She sat down and seated the gray box in the cradle, and a bar crawled across the screen. And Noah came and stood behind her chair with his arms folded and did not say anything. It pulled 39,000 data points. The chart drew itself from left to right. She read it backward, from the right edge, because the right edge was the part she could check against her own memory. And if the right edge was wrong, then the whole thing was garbage. The last 4 months came up as a jagged green band, sawing up and down between 40 and 80 degrees, with a hard, warm spike every day around 2 in the afternoon and a cold trough before dawn. Long, flat stretches in the low 60s, indoors. Then a night that went down to 31 and stayed there for 6 hours. That's outside, Noah said quietly. That's 4 months of a thing sitting outside. That's April 16th, she said, pointing at the deep, cold trough. That's the night the shelter turned me away, and I sat in the bus enclosure on Garfield until the first bus came. She dragged the chart left. The 28th of March came up. The line ran flat at 44 degrees, which was the inside of a coat pocket in a heated cab. And then at 11:51 at night, it jumped, hard, to 190 and back down. And then it went to 38 and stayed there. That's the fire, Noah said. That's me lying in a ditch, she said. The spike is the cab, then the ditch. It got down to 38 that night. I remember the number because it was on the sign outside the water plant. Then she dragged it left again, and she stopped talking. From the 26th of March at 4 in the afternoon until the 28th of March at 4 in the morning, the line was not in the range at all. It came up off the floor at 4 on the 26th and climbed to 61 degrees, and it sat at 61 degrees for 36 hours.
61 degrees, inside Pier 9, inside a case of insulin, which is a product that lives between 36 and 46 degrees and dies quietly outside it, without changing color, without smelling like anything, without ever once telling the person who injects it that anything is wrong. That's before you ever got in the truck, Noah said. That's before the truck was loaded. He crouched down beside the chair so his eyes were level with the screen. The freezer plant went down, she said. Ambient in that bay would have come up exactly like that. 36 hours.
Somebody knew by the second morning at the latest, because that room has an alarm, and the alarm goes to a phone. So why did it ship? Because it was worth $3,800,000, and because the alternative was a destruction report with a signature on it. She was very calm now, and her voice had gone somewhere flat and careful. You don't run a load like that in daylight, with a company driver on the payroll. You run it at 11 at night with a woman Northline hired by the run. And if it goes wrong, nobody has to write anybody's name anywhere. Noah did not move. That's why nobody will fix the certificate, she said. And she heard her own voice say it, and it was the first time the sentence had ever existed. I have been walking around for 4 months thinking they wouldn't fix it because it was hard. It isn't hard. Denise would fix it tomorrow if somebody handed her a reason. They won't touch it, because the second they open that file, they have to answer 2 questions. Who was actually driving? And why was that load moving at all? The little green dot on the gray box came on and went off, sitting there in the cradle, still doing its job. Noah stood up slowly and looked at the woman in his shop chair, and she watched him arrive at it. And he did not say the name, then or ever, unless she said it first. He went out and closed the yard gate and put the chain through it. When he came back, she had printed the chart on the thermal roll, all of it, in strips, and taped the strips end to end across the desk, like a paper river. He stood in the doorway, with the cold still on his jacket. I'm going to say it once, he said, and then we can go back to Wren. Say it. You're the woman on the plaque. Yes. I hauled for you for 6 years. He said it slowly, working it out as it came. I have stood in your dock at 2 a.m. in January. I have argued with your schedulers. I sent your office a letter in March about the rate and got back a form. I never saw the letter. I know you never saw the letter. That's not the part. He came in and put his hand flat on the taped-together paper. The part is that I fed you for 6 years, and I have never once seen your face. And I have been sitting across a desk from you for 11 weeks. Does it change anything? It changes what I'm risking. He looked up. It doesn't change what I'm doing. I just wanted to be the one who said it, instead of finding out in a room full of people. That's fair. Wren, he said, testing it. That's not nothing, by the way. You picked a bird that stays through the winter. I picked the first thing on a feed store calendar, she said, and he laughed. And it was the first noise anybody had made in that office all day that was not about temperature. This proves the load, she said. It doesn't prove me. A judge looks at this and sees a thermometer that was somewhere. It could have been in anybody's pocket. So what do you need? 2 more things, she said. Somebody who can put Roz Pike behind that wheel, and somebody who can put me anywhere but under that stone. Sodium lights turn everything at a truck gate the color of weak tea. She stood outside the ring of it at 11:15, in the dark part, and watched the cold roll out of Bay 4 in a slow white sheet every time the door came up. Oda Reyes came on at 11. She hung her coat on the same nail she had used for 19 years, put her glasses on the beaded chain, and squared the paper log on the counter. The woman came to the window at 11:20. Oda looked at her for a while. Neither of them said the obvious thing. I have one question, she said.
The night of March 28th. The reader was taped. Where did you write it? Oda's hands went flat on the counter. You know, she said, I have had 4 months to think about what I would say if anybody ever came and asked me that.
And I had a whole speech. You don't have to give it. I'm not going to. She turned around, bent down, and opened the bottom drawer of the desk, the deep one, the one with the broken runner that you have to lift while you pull. She took out a bundle about 4 inches thick. Misprinted delivery tickets. Hundreds of them. The kind the printer spits out crooked, with the header running off the edge. The kind that go in the recycling bin, because they are no good to anybody. And on the back of every single one, in ballpoint, in a small upright hand, a date, a time, a trailer number, a plate, and a name. The bundle was tied with a piece of white nylon strapping. Oda picked at the knot. It had been pulled tight a long time ago, and her fingers were cold, and it took her most of a minute, and neither of them filled the silence while she worked at it. When the reader went out, I told the office 3 times, she said. Work order sat open, so I wrote by hand.
19 years I have had a log at this gate, and I was not going to be the first shift that didn't. She got the knot loose and squared the stack and turned it around on the counter. That's the 26th through the 30th. The pages went by under a bare bulb. Trailers, plates, times. A Northline tractor at 10:52 at night on the 28th of March. And beside it, in that small upright hand, R. Pike. They put the other name in the paper on the 2nd, Oda said. I read it at this counter.
I looked at this drawer. Twice I got as far as the stairs with it. What stopped you? The first time, I thought I must have written it wrong, because a person believes a newspaper before she believes her own pen. Oda took her glasses off. The second time, I did not think that. The second time I had a cousin in scheduling who got moved to nights for asking about the alarm log, and my husband has a pump in his chest that costs more per month than this building, and the insurance for it comes off my badge.
That's not a small thing. It is not a good thing either, Oda said. Both can be true. Take it. I want it out of my drawer. 2 days later, Roland Keefe cleaned his file. The failure at Pier 9 in March got its written explanation at last, 11 days before the sale closed. And the explanation was that a night shift supervisor had failed to escalate an ambient alarm in accordance with procedure. It named one person. There was a separation letter attached to it, effective at the end of the month, worded warmly.
Hollis Trask read it in the break room at Pier 9, and then he drove out to a truck yard on the east edge of town at 6 in the morning and stood at the gate until somebody came and let him in. He did not apologize. She had not expected him to. He held out a manila envelope. You know what this is. No. April 8th, they sent me to the county to pick up personal effects. Company officer has to sign for them, and Keefe wasn't going to do it, so it was me. He tapped the envelope. You sign an inventory sheet. They keep one, you keep one. That's mine. She opened it there in the yard, with the sun not up. It was 1 page, typed on a form, with a case number at the top and 11 lines. Wristwatch, steel, band broken. Coat, wool, damaged by fire. Purse, vinyl, contents listed separately. Keys, 4, on ring. And line 7. Boots, work, leather, size 8. She read it 3 times. Then she looked up. You've had this since April. Yes. I wear an 11, Hollis. I know what you wear, Trask said. I sent a man to the vending room to get you a pair out of stores in 2022 because the ones you came in with got soaked. 11. I signed the requisition. The yard lights buzzed. Somewhere behind the shop, a reefer kicked on. Then say it out loud, she said, because I want to hear the actual sentence. On April 8th, I read line 7, and I knew the woman they buried was not you. He said it without any shape to it. And on April 24th, I handed you a mop. Why? 19 years, Trask said.
My wife's insurance runs off my badge, same as Oda's, except mine also has her medication on it. I told myself a woman who wanted to be found could go find herself a lawyer. I told myself somebody higher than me had already looked at that page. That one was a lie, and I knew it was a lie when I said it to myself in my own truck. He put his hands in his coat pockets. And this week they wrote my name on a failure I reported twice.
So here I am, and you should not think better of me than that. I don't. Good. They spread it out on the desk in the office at 7 that morning. The paper river of thermal printout, taped end to end. 39,000 points long. The bundle of misprinted tickets with R. Pike in ballpoint on the back of one of them. The inventory sheet with line 7. Iva came at 8, still in the clothes she wore to the temp agency, and stood over the desk and did not touch anything. Read line 7, Corrine said. Iva read it.
Then she read the ticket. Then she sat down in Noah's chair with her hands in her lap. Here's the part I want to say before we go any further, Corrine said. There are 2 things in this pile. One of them gets my name back. The other one gets your sister's name back. They are not the same thing. And they might not both happen. Okay. If I can only get one, I'm doing yours. Iva looked up. Why? Because I can live without mine, she said. I have been doing it since March.
She can't do anything without hers. That's the whole difference, and it took me 4 months to see it. Nobody said anything for a moment. The thermal paper curled at both ends of the desk where the tape had let go. When? Iva said. The 12th. That's the day they opened the building. That's the day they closed the sale, Corrine said. 9 days. On the 13th, every operating file in this company belongs to a fund in Chicago and goes into a box, and Denise will need a court order to look at a delivery ticket. There isn't a second date. There's the 12th. The new building smelled like fresh paint and carpet glue. The way a place smells when nobody has worked in it yet, and every surface is still telling the truth about what it is made of. They had set the signing table in the middle of the lobby, under the skylight. One long table, with a leather folder at each end and a short microphone on a stand between them. The plaque stood by the front doors, under a navy cloth. There were maybe 90 people, folding chairs again, and a woman from the local paper with a camera, and a row of drivers standing at the back in their boots, because drivers always stand at the back. At the service gate on the north side, Odalis Reyes sat in a shack she had asked to be moved to for one shift, a favor she had never once called in before in 19 years. A woman in a clean gray coat walked up to her window at 10 minutes past 2. Oda looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then she reached out and pressed the button, and the arm went up, and she wrote something in her paper log and underlined it twice. Roland Keefe was 11 minutes into his remarks. He was talking about the lake. He had a good line about how the lake never gets warm, and neither does the business, and it got the laugh it was built for. And he was turning to Quentin Sable to bring him up, when a woman came down the side aisle, carrying a cardboard file box. She did not go to the podium. She went to the signing table, set the box down on the leather folder, and pulled the microphone on its stand toward herself. Before anybody signs that, she said, I want to read one line off a county form. 2 security officers started forward, and then stopped, because the woman from the paper had already turned her camera, and because Sable had raised one hand about 4 inches off the table, without appearing to decide to. She took out a single sheet.
This is the personal effects inventory issued by the county medical examiner on April 8th for the woman recovered from the North Shore Road. Line 1, wristwatch. Line 4, keys. Line 7. She held it up so the rows nearest her could see the form and the case number. Boots. Work. Leather. Size 8. She put the sheet down. I wear an 11. The man who signed for those effects has bought me boots out of company stores and signed the requisition. And he read line 7 on the 8th of April. And he is standing at the back of this room, and he will tell you so himself.
90 heads turned. Hollis Trask did not sit down and did not look at his feet. Size 8, she said again. That is all it would have taken. Anybody could have caught it. It cost nothing. Nobody read it, because reading it meant somebody had to go find out whose feet those were. She reached into the box again. Second thing. She lifted out a bundle of misprinted delivery tickets, still with the white strapping around it. The card reader at the Pier 9 gate was out of service for 3 weeks in March. There was an open work order.
During those 3 weeks, the gate log was kept by hand. She untied it and took the top sheet off and read it exactly as it was written, in a flat voice, like a dispatcher. March 28th, 10:52 at night. Tractor, North Line. Trailer, 614. Driver, R. Pike. Somewhere in the third row, a scheduler said a word out loud, quietly, and put her hand over her mouth. Her name was Rosalind Pike. She was 41. Northline hired her by the run, so she was on nobody's payroll. So when that truck went off the road, there was no one in this company whose job it was to make a phone call about her. She set the ticket down flat. Her sister has been putting flyers on the bus shelter on Garfield since April. She looked down the room at Keith. 2 weeks ago, I stood at a fence and asked you to say that name, she said. And you tried. And you could not find it. That is the whole case. Everything else on this table is paperwork. The third thing she did not lift out. She turned the box around so the open side faced the room, and stood the taped roll of thermal paper on end, and let it fall open down the length of the table. A green line printed on a strip of white, unrolling past the leather folder, and off the far edge onto the floor.
This is a temperature logger out of a case of insulin. Serial number is on the back, and it matches the lot record for the load that shipped from Pier 9 that night. I took it off that pallet myself at 10:40 and put it in my coat pocket, because I wanted to read it before somebody read it to me in the morning. She walked along the table with 2 fingers on the paper. Insulin lives between 36 and 46 degrees. Outside that, it stops working. It does not change color. It does not smell.
The person who injects it has no way to know. Her fingers stopped. March 26th, 4 in the afternoon. The refrigeration in Bay 2 goes down. Ambient comes up. She moved her hand along the strip. 61 degrees. And it stays at 61 degrees for 36 hours. There is an alarm on that room, and it dials a phone. She lifted her hand off the paper. Then, at 11 at night on the 28th, that load left the yard with a driver hired by the run, instead of being written off as a destruction.
$3,800,000 of it. Quentin Sable had already turned his folder to the back. He found the page he wanted, ran a finger down it, and stopped at a clause. He did not look up while he was reading it, and everybody in that lobby watched him not look up. "Roland," he said, "that's not what happened. Roland, this page has your signature under a representation that there are no undisclosed product quality events." I said, "That's not what happened." Keith came off the podium and down the 2 steps, and his voice was still level, because his voice was always level, and that was somehow the worst thing about the next 30 seconds. "You want to talk about that load? Fine, let's talk about it." He put one hand on the back of an empty chair.
Do you know what a destruction report on a lot like that does in the middle of a sale? It doesn't cost 3.8. It cuts the multiple. It reopens diligence. Halstead walks.
And if Halstead walks in March, this company gets broken up and sold in pieces. And I am standing in a room with 2,000 people whose insurance runs off this building. Roland, Sable said, I made a call. He turned to face the room, and he was not pleading. He was explaining, and he believed every word. One load, one night. It was covered by the time the sun came up, and nobody was ever going to be hurt by it. How do you know that? It came from Corrine, quietly, from beside the table.
Because I read the log, Keefe said. The lobby got very still. You read which log? He heard it. Everyone heard it. He stood there in front of 90 people with his own sentence out in the air in front of him and no way to walk backward through it. On the morning of the 29th, he said, at my kitchen table, 7 in the morning. The plant sent me the ambient chart for Bay 2 because it was in my alert group, and I read it. And I saw 36 hours at 61 degrees. And the truck was already in the ditch by then.
And what did you do? I did not call anyone, Roland Keefe said. He sat down on one of the folding chairs in the front row, which was not a chair he was supposed to sit in, and put his hands on his knees. Corinne turned the microphone stand around on the table so it faced the aisle. Miss Pike. Iva came up from the 4th row. She had a piece of paper folded into quarters that she had been holding since 1 o'clock, and when she got to the table, she did not open it, because it turned out she did not need it. Her name was Rosalind Ann Pike, she said. She was born on the 9th of June. She worked days at the packing plant on Airport Road, and she took truck runs at night when they had them. She has a thermos with a dent in it that used to be our mother's. She looked at the plaque under the navy cloth by the doors. She is buried in Forest Hill under somebody else's name, and I would like her back.
Quentin Sable closed the leather folder in front of him and capped the pen, and did not open either one again. 6 weeks later, the ground at Forest Hill smelled like wet dirt and cut grass, because the crew had come through that morning, and the sun had not dried it yet. Denise from the county came out for it, which she did not have to do. She stood back by the service road, with her hands folded, and let the monument people work. They set the straps, and lifted the old stone out of its bed. It came up with a sucking sound, and a shelf of dirt hanging off the bottom edge, and they laid it face down on a pallet, and it was strange how ordinary the whole thing was. 2 men, a hand truck, a piece of granite. The new one went in with a piece of leveling string and a rubber mallet. Rosalind Ann Pike. 2 years, and the second one was this one. Under that, 4 words Iva had picked herself and would not explain to anybody.
Ava knelt and pushed the sod back against the edges with the flat of her hand, working her way all the way around, pressing each seam down. Corrine stayed 1 step back on the grass the whole time and did not help, because it was not hers to help with. You can come closer, Iva said, without looking up. You're allowed. I'm all right here. You've been standing a step back since September. Iva sat down on her heels. I've been meaning to ask you something, and I keep not asking it. Ask. Was she scared? The lake wind came through the young trees at the back of the section. No, Corrine said. It was fast, and she never saw it. And the last thing she did with her hands was put both of them on the wheel, which is the right thing, and I have thought about that a lot. Iva nodded and looked at the stone for a while. Okay, she said. Then come closer. Corrine came and stood beside her, and the 2 of them pressed down the last seam together. The amended certificate had come through 11 days earlier. 2 documents in 1 envelope. One that ended a woman who had never died, and one that finally, at the end of the summer, admitted the death of a woman who had. Roland Keefe was charged on a Tuesday morning in October. Falsification of distribution records under the State Drug Act. Failure to report an adulterated lot. Making a false statement in a death investigation. He appeared with a lawyer, said the word yes 4 times,
and was out of the building in under an hour. Nobody from the company went.
There was no crowd on the courthouse steps, and no photographers. Corinne was not there either. She was in a yard in Hermantown that morning, with a clipboard, checking pulp temps on a load of chicken, which is a thing she had decided to do herself for a while. The board met on the 21st. They offered her the chair back. They offered it the way boards do, with a resolution already typed and a pen already on the table. And they were surprised when she asked for something else. She asked for 6 months.
For 6 months, she wanted one job in the company, and it was not that one. Night cold chain auditor, hourly, on the clock, with one authority written into the letter. She could stop any load in any yard at any hour, and no one above her could restart it without putting their name on a form. "You already own the company," one of them said, and he did not mean it unkindly. "You can just tell people what to do." "That's the part that didn't work last time," she said. She signed one other thing that day.
It had been drafted in March, and it had been sitting in a folder on the 4th floor since then. And she had meant to sign it on the 29th, in the morning, after the run. It ended the use of subcontracted drivers who do not appear on a payroll. It required that every person who moves a Barlow load has a name in a Barlow system before the truck leaves the yard. She wrote the date on it. Then she said the other date out loud, the one it should have carried. And she said the number of days between the two. And there were 4 people in the room. And nobody wrote that part down. And all 4 of them remembered it. At the new building on the North Shore Road, they took the plaque off the wall by the front doors. They did not put anything else there. The paint around where it had hung was a shade darker than the wall, a clean rectangle at eye height, and the facilities manager asked twice about getting a painter out, and both times she told him to leave it. The building has no name. On the sign at the entrance, it says the road it is on, and nothing else. And the drivers who back into that dock at 4 in the morning have no idea there was ever a discussion about it. The last thing happened at the truck yard on the east edge of town, on a Thursday in November, with the first real snow coming in off the lake. There is a room at the end of the shop, with a cot and a sink and a space heater with a frayed cord. There has always been a badge lock on that door. It was put on years ago by the company that owned the yard before Noah's father bought it. And the reader only ever accepted cards issued to full-time employees, which the men and women who show up for a single run at 11 at night have never had. Corinne brought a screwdriver out from the office. She got 2 of the 4 screws out, and then she stopped and held it out to Noah. He looked at it. "Your yard," she said. "Your father." He took it. It was cold enough that the metal stuck a little to his fingers. He got the 3rd screw, and then the 4th. And the reader came away from the frame with 2 wires trailing out of it, and he snipped them and dropped the whole thing in a coffee can on the bench. The door swung when he pushed it.
That was all. No noise, no ceremony. A door that used to need something now needed nothing. They were still standing there when a man came across the lot from the fuel island in a canvas coat with his collar up. Neither of them knew him. He was hauling a single run for a broker out of Superior, and he had 6 hours before his next window, and there was snow in his hair. He put his hand flat on the door and looked at the 2 of them, waiting to be told he could not. Nobody told him anything. So he pushed it open and went in and got a cup off the stack and filled it from the pot and stood there in the warm with both hands around it. Corinne watched his hands. He drank half of it standing up, said something to Noah about the ice on the grade out of 2 Harbors, put the cup in the bin, and went back out to his truck. And he never learned there had been an argument about that door. If you have ever put in a night's work for a place that would not have known your name if something had happened to you, come tell us about it below. Those are the comments we read twice.